So I will stop here with technical aspects. And as you can see in this slide, we're going to start with some opening words from Thierry Caquet, who is the scientific director for environment at INRAE, but also the chair of the peer network. And Thierry will also be moderating this webinar and the discussion at the end. So Thierry, the floor is yours.
So thank you, Clara, for this information, and welcome everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to this peer Alternet webinar on science policy interface in practice. This is the title we've chosen. This webinar is organized by INRAE, which is a founding member of Alternet and peer European networks. And it's my pleasure to introduce this event together with the chair of the Alternet Management Board, Alan Watt from UKCH. And it's Clara was saying I will be also in charge of moderating the webinar with the help of my colleagues, Clara, but also Bertie Folio and Louise Vast. So as you all know, climate change and other components of global change generate new risks for nature, for the environment, but also for human societies, even through our food supply. And this raises huge challenges for all components of human societies, now, of course, but also for the future and for the next generation. And in front of these challenges, inaction is not an option. We should act, we should foster transformation, transforming the society. And to tackle these challenges, science-informed public policy decisions are needed to protect the environment while ensuring the sustainability of inclusive societies. We should also ensure that the required transformations are really designed, implemented, and monitored. In this context, expertise and policy support activities should give public policymakers the scientific and technical knowledge, tools, and methods they need to clarify, design, implement, and evaluate public policies. At INRAE, we use interdisciplinary research, innovation, and support for public policies as tools to guide the emergence of sustainable agricultural and food production systems. Scientific knowledge clearly forms the backbone of our expertise. To achieve this, we collaborate with French or European ministries and institutions, but also with international institutions such as the FAO or the World Bank. And this expertise also supports the orientation of future INRAE own research programs. We share a lot of these activities and a lot of in this domain with our EU partners, especially within PEER. We give you some details about PEER. PEER is a partnership of 8 of the largest European environmental centers. It was founded in 2001, with the aim to combine forces with joint strategy in environmental sciences and to enhance research on ecological sustainability. PEER members carry out basic and applied research, combining different disciplines from natural and social science. Our research activity covers all fields of the environment, particularly addressing the interaction between man and nature. And our network is contributing to the dynamics toward the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. And to be more precise on our current strategic agenda, we focus mainly on 2 topics. The first one is on climate action and adaptation, and the second one is on the biodiversity question in support to the EU biodiversity strategy. In addition to the publication of policy briefs, position papers, and statements, we have regular exchanges with EU DGs and other stakeholders regarding the EU agenda on environment-related topics. This webinar is, to my knowledge, the first one organized by INRAE in this format with PEER and Alternet, and the program we've chosen to organize is designed to illustrate a method of supporting public policy that can be carried out by a research institute, alone or in cooperation with partner organizations, and it also proposes to explore the role of scientific expertise in informing public debate and the development of public policy. It has definitely 3 main objectives. The first one is to address the issues and methods involved in conducting this type of scientific appraisal by a research institute. We'll have a presentation about this by Girisha, the head of INRAE Directorate for Scientific Expertise, Foresight, and Advanced Studies. Then the second objective is to learn from a concrete example with the presentation by 2 INRAE colleagues, Laure Mamy and Stéphane Pes, of a recent collective assessment on the impacts of plant protection products on biodiversity and ecosystem services. And then we will have the feedback of 2 representatives for public authority one from the commissioning authority with the intervention of Yannick Autret from the French Ministry of Ecological Transition, and also Tobin Robinson, who is the head of the Environmental Plant and Ecotoxicology Risk Assessment Production Department at EFSA, to share his views on how policymakers at European level, which did not commission the study, could use the results for its own action. So I thank you again for attending this webinar, and I have the pleasure to give the floor to the chair of the Alternet Management Board, Alan Watt from UKCH. So please, Alan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. On behalf of Alternet, I am delighted that we are supporting this webinar organised by INRAE. As many of you will know, Alternet is a pan-European network of 33 partner institutes from 21 countries, and it includes most of the peer institutes. Its goal is to foster the European science policy interface on biodiversity and ecosystem services, which is clearly extremely relevant to today's event. Alternet supports several activities, including the series of webinars on science and policy coordinated by Juliet Young from INRAE, of which this is one. I urge you to watch out for future webinars, but you can also watch recordings of past ones. I hope you're sitting comfortably today, but I highly recommend the webinar on uncomfortable science policy relationships hosted by the James Hutton Institute, which is available online. At the practical level, the Eclipse mechanism, managed by Alternet and coordinated by Marie van der Waal from UFZ, supports decision-making affecting biodiversity and ecosystem services by answering questions from policymakers and others. It does so by synthesizing the best available knowledge from both scientists and other knowledge holders, and its work is clearly very similar to the examples we will hear about today. Alternet also hosts conferences roughly every 2 years and an annual summer school in the south of France. Registration for the latter will be open next month. Both of these activities have a strong focus on the practical relevance of science to policy. I also have to mention that this year is the 20th anniversary of Alternet, and we hope you will all join in celebrating it. I'm personally very much looking forward to today's seminar. I've spent about half my research career on biodiversity and the other half on plant protection, from wheat fields to macadamia orchards. Today's topic is crucial to both ensuring that we have a sustainable food supply for the growing world population, while biodiversity also thrives and contributes through ecosystem services to food production. I very much hope you enjoy it. Thank you.
Your mic is muted, Thierry.
Sorry about this. So thank you, Alan, for these inspiring words. And now I give the floor to Girisha for the introductory speech on the collective scientific assessment at INRAE, how we use it as a tool to enlighten publicity debate and inform policymaking. So please, Gay, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Thierry. Good afternoon, everybody. So I will present you how we conduct this approach of collective scientific assessment at INRAE. Okay, so we have a very interesting project, a EU project called Eclipse, who has established the map, an overview of all the methods that we can use for public decision. We have about 20 different methods. And at INRAE, and now INRAE for 20 years, we have developed various methods based on literature analysis, modeling, and scenario building, you know, to inform public decision. And more precisely, we have produced various scientific tools and methods, mainly at national level, through three types of project. So the first one is what we call collective scientific assessment. So it's a synthesis of multidisciplinary and certified scientific knowledge. We identify the facts, the uncertainties, and the controversies to shed light on complex societal issues posed by governments, by public bodies. The second type of project is what we call advanced study. In that case, it's like a collective scientific assessment, but on a more target and focused subject. And we must data analysis, either from original simulation, mobilizing existing models, and greater consideration of non-certified literature to be able to really embed the study in particular context. And the third approach is what we call foresight. In this case, we developed scenarios at distant horizons to inform correct decisions about possible futures. So we do this at INRAE within a dedicated structure, what we call the Directorate for Collective Scientific Assessment, Foresight, and Advanced Study, DOPE in French. So we develop always multidisciplinary projects during 18-24 months. All our work is based on scientific knowledge. We mobilize both INRAE expert skills and non-INRAE expert skills. It's very important to this. And in a specific committee for each project. Generally, we have between 20 and 30 experts. And all what we produce is really debated and widely disseminated inside and outside INRAE. And we produced a report about 1,000 pages, a synthesis about 100 pages, and a summary of 10 pages to be able to address different public. And all the results are presented during a public one-day symposium. And we apply the main principle of expertise. The first one is expert skills. The expert I identified and qualified on the basis of their publication. Second principle is independence of experts. All the experts are public scientists, researchers, or professors, and their links of interest are identified. We really have a pluralism of the experts based on their disciplines, on their approach, on their origins, etc. We have a traceability and a transparency of our methodologies and of our public sources. And we really give a state of the knowledge. We did not address advice or recommendation. And this directorate, DOPE, has about 20 people staff. So how do we produce this collective scientific assessment? So to do this, we have three phases, very classical for this kind of work. So the first one is the instruction before conducting the work. The second phase is really the work process. And in our case, it's really an interdisciplinary work process. The interdisciplinary aspect is very important. And the third phase is about the restitution of the results and the dissemination of the results. So all the second phase is about 80 and 24 months. And the first phase, the instruction phase, is very important. So it allows to define the terms of reference, and we have a specific agreement between INRAE and the public bodies for each project. And we have also the definition of the agenda. And this can take quite a long time, 6 months, 1 year, sometimes it takes 2 years to be sure that there is a total agreement between INRAE, and sometimes we work with different partners in France, like CNRS, IRD, IFREMER, etc., and the public bodies like the Ministry of Ecology, for example. During this phase, we also identify the different experts. We will constitute the expert groups, the expert committee, and the choice is based on the scientific production of each scientist. And during this phase also, we set up an advisory committee, so with the representative of INRAE and of the public bodies. And also we set up a dedicated committee with different stakeholders. This is really very important because this stakeholders committee will give a view on the work that we propose. They will not interact, but they will give us a specific appreciation. So then we will begin the work. We will organize different plenary sessions with the expert committee to conduct, firstly, an initial collective setup for a common conceptual framework to be able so to review the literature. We will do this by topic and by subgroups. And sometimes we can add some complementary modeling aspect. And this group will conduct the critical analysis of all the knowledge, taking stock of the achievements, debate, and controversies across the scientific committees, the uncertainties which must be considered in the interpretation of results, and identify gaps that will need to be filled in the future. And at the end, we will formulate collective conclusions. So progressively, we built the bibliographic corpus with librarians. The place of librarians is very, very important. And we have permanent cross-cutting dialogues between experts, reports online, chapters drafting, and a lot of proofreading.
You've got 1 minute remaining.
2 minutes, no? 1 minute only?
Right.
Sorry.
Go on. Carry
Okay.
on.
And so the third phase is about restitution and dissemination of the final report of the results. It's always a large public event. It's very important that this is public. And we will disseminate to various scientific community, policy makers, and civil society. So on this slide, I would like to show different examples, but I have not enough time. So Thierry, just to conclude. So with this collective scientific assessment and also with advanced study and foresight, we really allow to synthesize scientific knowledge on critical society issues. These projects are collaborative, transparent, and independent. They adopt a multidisciplinary and systemic approach. They can provide also some models, biophysical or economical. We recruit the best experts in the scientific committees, and we are able to collaborate with national or international partners. And all these tools are really useful, both to support public policies for sustainable development, but also for research institutes to anticipate large investment programs. Thank you very much, Thierry. It's okay for me.
Well, thank you, Guy. I think we will have some questions in the discussion part of the webinar to come back to this rationale for these tools. And now give the floor to Laure Mamy and Stefan Pace. We were the two among the coordinators of recent action in this field, and they will present themselves and present the activity. And just to mention that this was performed with another research organization in France, which is IFREMER. So I don't know if Laure or Stefan will start. It's up to you now to have the control of the screen. Okay, Laure, please go on.
So we are going to present you our collective scientific assessment focused on the impacts of plant protection projects on biodiversity and ecosystem services, and in particular, we are going to focus on the dissemination and impact on public action. So just a quick introduction about the context that, as Guy told you, it's about 20 years that we started in France with collective scientific assessment. And the first one was done in 2005 about pesticide, agriculture, and environment. And as you can see, there were several expertise, and our expertise was finished in 2022 among various expertise, and in particular those that of INSERM on pesticide and human health. And in parallel, there is a French Ecophyto program, which is dedicated to reduce the use of pesticide in France. And also this work is included in the overall European context with the pesticides package. So I will shortly present this overall context. As you know, there is an unprecedented erosion of biodiversity for many years. And it is well known that chemical pollution, including plant protection products, is one of the main causes of biodiversity decline. And that's why, among other reasons, this collective scientific assessment was done. So the overall objective of this CSA was to review the scientific knowledge on the impact of plant protection products on biodiversity and ecosystem services along the source-to-seek continuum. And the other objectives were to inform public and risk assessment authorities, in particular regarding the improvement of evaluation procedures, improvement of PPPs monitoring following their placing on the market, risk management, and research needs. So the scope of this ESA was focused on plant protection products, either conventional or biocontrol or biopesticides, in agricultural and non-agricultural areas, in French overseas territories and in mainland France. And we focused also on atmosphere, terrestrial environment, marine aquatic environment, and continental aquatic environment. We also considered the approved and banned plant protection products, their transformation products, and the adjuvants and co-formulants of PPPs. But it is important to note that some topics were excluded from this CSA, such as the agricultural practices and cropping systems limiting the use of PPPs, because there was another CSA in parallel which focused on this topic. And groundwater and industrial discharge were also excluded. So at the end, about 4,500 references were cited in this work. So the implementation of this CSA, as you can see on this scheme, so there were three bakers, so the ministries of ecological transition, agriculture, and research. And the two mandated institutes were INRAE and IFREMER. And the overall organization of the CSA is indicated in the bottom of the figure. So there was a project team constituted by the project manager, 3 scientific leads, and 3 librarians. And this CSA also involved 46 experts, including the scientific leads, which were divided in various working groups, as I will explain just after. And this CSA was followed all along this CSA by a stakeholder advisory committee and an oversight committee. The 46 experts were distributed into 13 working groups, depending, of course, of their expertise and also of the topics that were studied in the CSA. So briefly, we had a topic focused on the contamination of the environment and biota by PPPs, the transfers of PPPs in environment and the various levers for action. The main part of the CSA was focused on the effects on biodiversity and ecosystem services and focused on various organisms, primary producers, microorganisms, terrestrial and aquatic vertebrates and invertebrates. There were also some working groups dedicated to modeling and interactions between science and regulation. Some working groups focused on food webs and biocontrol, and there were also some cross-cutting issues focused on non-agricultural areas and overseas. So as Guy told you just before, there are some mandatory deliverables for a CSA. So a main report, synthesis, summaries, and also books. For some of them in French and also in English. All are publicly available. You have the link on this slide. And of course, there were also a public final seminar, which occurred in May 2022. And there were more than 600 attendants. So now I leave the floor to Stéphane.
Okay, thank you, Laure. So in the following slides, I'm now going to show you how the main conclusion of our collective work have been disseminated to different scientists, stakeholders, and the general public, and how this can support decision-making in public action. So firstly, it was really important for us to make our main results and conclusion available to the International Scientific Committee. So we have engaged in a significant editorial effort, as you can see here, to publish several scientific articles on the subject. So you can see that 17 papers have been submitted to date, and 9 of which being already published. And for information, you will find the full list of articles on the last slide of this presentation. In addition, we've also given about 15 presentations at national and international scientific conferences, as well as in seminars and webinars organized by various international bodies, such as the Joint Research Centers, the Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, the European Food Safety Authority, EFSA, or PARC, the European Partnership for the Assessment of Risks from Chemicals. And our conclusions were also made available to various French stakeholders through the publication of articles in various national technical journals. So in in addition, we interacted directly with a number of stakeholders. So this interaction, as mentioned by Laure, took place directly during the course of the collective assessment as part of the advisory committee that met 3 times during the working period. And this committee was composed of around 20 members representing various categories of stakeholders, including environmental managers, representatives of the agri-food community, manufacturers and users of plant protection products, consumers, and so on. Laure, please.
Sorry, I don't know why it doesn't work.
Should click on the slide, yes.
Okay, that's okay, thank you. And we were then regularly invited to present our findings at conferences organized by various French public and private organizations and associations. At the same time, so the collective assessment received a great media coverage and high visibility on social networks. So it clearly helped to disseminate key messages to the general public. So for instance, almost 300 articles have been published on the subject in the written press or in various web media. And in addition, we have occasionally presented our work to the general public and to university and postgraduate students through targeted lectures and presentations. So in addition to this effort to promote and disseminate our results, we have regularly been invited by public authorities to take part in strategic discussion in support of public actions. So in particular, we have been involved in various parliamentary debates, and probably one of the most significant contribution concerns our active participation in the Commission of Inquiry led by the French National Assembly to assess the causes of France's inability to achieve the objectives of successive plans to control the impact of plant protection products on human and environmental health. So as part of this commission, more than 120 people connected with this issue were interviewed between July and November last year, including 4 scientists involved in the collective assessment. And accordingly, the commission report, which was published recently, as you can see on December the 14th, 2023, the conclusion of this report makes several references to the conclusions of our work. And finally, yes, we have also been invited several times by the French National Assembly, for example, within the framework of a working group entitled Weaknesses and Consequences of Pesticide Assessment, or even to participate to an information mission about biodiversity in agricultural landscapes carried out by the Commission for Sustainable Development and Spatial Planning. And finally, we also regularly interact with different national decision makers and health and environmental managers. And of course, the main aim of this kind of interaction is to support decision making in the public action related to different plans and initiatives, such as the 4th National Plan for Health and Environment, the next national eco-phyto plan that should be probably implemented soon, the phytopharmacovigilance scheme, which aims at monitoring the environmental contamination and environmental impacts of plant protection products in France, or the 4th national plan for chlordecone. I would like also to mention that a few days after having delivered the conclusions of our work, we were also invited to participate in a roundtable about chemicals that was organized by the French Ministry of Ecological Transition and Territorial Cohesion within the framework of the French presidency of the European Union in 2022. So, in regards of everything that has been presented here, we can therefore hope, legitimately hope, that the work carried out will influence or should influence decision-making and therefore have an impact on public action, at least on a national scale. But it is still too early to assess, to clearly assess the resulting outcomes. So to conclude, it's important to thank all the people who contributed to the collective scientific assessment. So in particular, all the scientific experts. So you can see here the list of all the experts. So as mentioned by Guy, generally this kind of assessment mobilized about 20 or 30 experts, but in our case, there were more than 46 experts, so it was a very large group of scientists. And we would like also to thank all the people and structure who supported this work. And if you want to know more about our scientific collective assessment, you can find here the list of all the documents that are already available in English, because of course most of the report and the deliverables are in French, but you can see here that we clearly made an effort to disseminate our conclusion to the international community. So thank you for your attention.
So thanks a lot, Laura and Stefan, for not only sticking to the time, but being more precise than than anticipated. So it will let more time for discussion, and probably you have some question, not only on the outcomes of the assessment, but also in the detailed content of it. Yeah, some question in the question and answers part of the Zoom, and strongly encourage colleagues to ask some more questions for you and for Guy, of course. And now, as I said in the beginning, we are going to have the feedback from two practitioners of public policy, if I may say so. The first one as a representative of the French Ministry of Ecology, which was one of the three ministries that commissioned this foresight exercise. And so if you want now take the floor, Yannick, to give you the feedback. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I just letting my screen. Okay, so I'm Yannick Autrey, head of unit in charge of research on biodiversity at the French Ministry of Ecological Transition. And I replace also Marc Moroni, that was also embedded into a never-ending meeting. And I'm sure that he would have been you for the best today, but he asked me a few minutes ago, just shortly before this conference, to replace him at the last moment. So I will do my best, and I will try to share with you what was also the endeavor of this action within our ministry. As it was said, the ministry also is one of the first funder of this action, and it was also at the heart of our action to engage this action. To give you more elements about what is our role and how we are organized, I think it's important to say you that the Ministry of Ecological Transition, it's like a Swiss knife. We have more or less everything under the same roof, with transport, energy, environment, risk, etc. So it's a really multi-role ministries. And within this multi-role ministry, we have also the General Directorate for Sustainable Development, Commissariat Général au Développement Durable, which also has a key role to play, not only within the ministry, but also with other ministries into a transversal action to ensure that transversal knowledge dedicated to environment are well integrated into public policies. And to base its actions, we use really deeply research at the heart of our policies. And also the role of the research department is really to ensure that we can have the best knowledge available to feed our policies and to contribute to collective expertise and collective improvements. So we play a role really at the interface between science and action, and we try to optimize our action within a multi-actor environment. So to achieve this goal, this particular goal on what has been managed by INRAE, it's also based on a long-term history that started years ago. It was said just before that it's not the products that have been recently released are not coming from nothing. And it started more than 15 years ago with first projects that were created by 28. And this first production was dedicated more to identify what were clearly risks. And it became really a political challenge for us to create what became right after the first Ecophyto plan in 2008. And this Ecophyto plan also set a target of 50% of reduction in the use of plant protection products within the 10 years. But 10 years after, we also saw that we needed also to improve this action, and we needed really to deepen our knowledge. And it required also to optimize this action in 2008 with a multidisciplinary knowledge approach project to better understand what were the relationship between agriculture and biodiversity. And this expertise, already managed by INRAE and other partners, was one of the fundatory tools that we needed to move forward and to see how we could establish a strategic plan that could be appropriated by multi-stakeholder partners. So here you see the different steps, and by 2020, when we started to make a synthesis of the plan and how it was also appropriated, we realized that we really needed to move a step forward. And in narrow link with the Ministry of Research and the Ministry of Agriculture, we engaged also the new collective evaluation of this new project also had three goals. Also, assess the impact of plant protection products on biodiversity, shed lights on methods for evaluating plant protection products, but also at the end identify solutions to reduce or manage past contamination, because if we are able to reduce what will be done in the future, we have also to manage what has been done in the past, and that represents a huge challenge for ecosystems to be protected and to be improved. So we were really interested in the element of the consensus about knowledge gaps, about controversies, about uncertainties, and all those elements all together to be put really in a very clear way to feed our everyday action. How has it been used at national level? Those results, first step, as it was said, for communication. People and colleagues and partners needs also to know what is in this report and what are the results. It was also done through internal working groups, summaries, internship that are producing synthesis for these actions. It's also the basis for the programmation of research, because even if we have a global overview, we need really to deepen some points, and we need also to improve a way of knowing more on those topics and how to solve the main problems that we have to face, and to use this collective expertise for better research programming. And for this we will launch, but it's already a bit too early. We will launch a new research call in the upcoming year, but detailed topics are still under discussion. So if you come back to us in a few weeks or months, we will be able to say more. But stay tuned on this point, because it can be of interest for several actors to be involved in upcoming research projects. And this project and the upcoming project will also continue to feed on the discussion and position to improve public policies that will be developed in the coming months and years, and to really improve also the relation between agriculture and plant protection products. This project is also a tool at the end as a scientific reference material to establish the new ecophyto plan, how we will improve also to the risk management measures and environment labeling national strategy for biodiversity that has been recently released. So it's really a fundatory and fundamental resource for us that need really to be appropriated at everyday job for all of our action. Last but not least, I wanted to highlight some points that are really of the highest interest for us. It's about the use at national level with complementary projects that are engaged or to be engaged very soon. First, to complete with this, we have launched a collective scientific assessment about protect crops by increasing plant diversity in agricultural areas. And we also have supported the Foresight European Chemical Pesticides Free Agriculture in 2050. Those both actions also help us for the cap and regulation on nature restoration. They also feed our action, feed our arguments when we have to debate about how to protect grasslands and how to integrate this in the National Strategy for Biodiversity that has been published at the end of last year in France. But we need really to continue and to deepen those actions, and also using research for us on facilitating its appropriation by end users and political end users is really something critical. And we need really to have an integrated approach of all those topics to ensure that this can be managed into really into a One Health perspective. That is something that is really weak today, that needs really to be much more developed in the near future if we want to face the multiple challenges that we have to face today. So I hope that I gave you in a short time enough information, and maybe later I will be able to give you.
Thank you, Yannick. It was a real challenge in the last minute to take the floor, and it's a brilliant. And I think we have some questions for you regarding especially the perhaps different timing of science research on one hand and the political dimensions on the other end, how to make the agenda match or not. And perhaps you have some reflection on this in the discussion part in a few minutes. So it's now my pleasure to welcome Tobin Robinson from EFSA to have the feedback this time on someone who could be interested in the results of such an exercise, but who did not commission it. So Tobin, if you want to share with us your reflection about this type of activity and how EFSA or other regulatory agency can take them on board for the future of regulation. So please take the floor.
Thank you. So good afternoon. And thanks for the opportunity to participate into this discussion. Certainly the subject area, very interesting, very relevant for the European Food Safety Authority where I work. Just a very quick reminder of the role of EFSA within the European Food Safety Regulatory System. We are a science organization. We provide scientific advice and technical advice to the risk managers, which at the European level means the European Commission, but also to the member states as well. And the scientific advice that we provide is most usually in the form of risk assessment. That's how we formalize the information. And it's a way, one could say, of interpreting the scientific information that is out there into recommendations that can be for which the risk managers can take action. And that's really what we're after, is translating science into legislative action. So the next slide, please. So what I'll do today is try to give you a quick whiz through what we do in the area of pesticides and environmental risk assessment. This is just one aspect of many that EFSA covers, but that's the subject for today. So we look at this really in two aspects, what we call prospective risk assessment and retrospective risk assessment. Now, from a legislative point of view, EFSA's responsibilities for environmental risk assessment in the area of pesticides is principally what we call prospective risk assessment. So this is where we are being asked to assess new plant protection products, pesticides, that are going to be put on the market, or at least that's what the applicant would hope. So we are trying to predict the potential future effects if such plant protection products were put into use. So through this, to highlight any potential risks that we see, and also highlight corresponding mitigation measures that could be put in place to help manage that. That is mostly what we do. Not so explicit in the legislation is the other side of the coin, retrospective risk assessment. So this would be, for example, assessing the likelihood that observed effects are due to past or current exposure to specific stressors. So this is the instance where pesticides are already in use. And from a legislative point of view, we get involved in this when we're involved in reassessment of pesticides that have already been on the market. And there we're looking to bring in information on what actually has been the effect, how have these been used, what kind of residues are we finding in the environment, to bring that into our risk assessments. But this is less explicit in the legislation, which as a consequence means that there is less formal data gathering on this, in fact, less structured data, so a little bit more complicated for us. But already to say that this type of information, in fact, was largely what was being highlighted in the report from INRAE. So from that point of view, very interesting for us. And then to bring together the prospective and the retrospective, we see a systems-based approach is the way to be able to combine these two aspects. And by a system-based approach, we mean the integration of landscape and ecology. So the regulation that we work to principally in this area is Regulation 1107/2009. Remember that number, I'm sure it'll be interesting for you. And this is basically the regulation that describes the approval of active substances in the European Union. So we only assess, as EFSA, active substances. The pesticide products themselves are actually assessed at member states level. Next slide, please. So what does the legislation tell us to do? Well, in terms of protection, in the legislation, all we have is a general protection goal. And here it is, I'll read it out for you. So no unacceptable effect on the environment, with particular regard to the impact on non-target species, including on the ongoing behavior of those species and on the biodiversity and the ecosystems. Very, very broad, very, very general. And the key word in this, all of this, is unacceptable, which of course is something that's rather difficult to define. And that's where we use the science to help guide the risk manager on how to interpret that one single word. In terms of practicality, we are moving towards making this operational through the use of specific protection goals. And under specific protection goals, what we aim to do is to determine what needs protecting, where this protection should take place, and to which extent, so how much of a particular thing it is that we want to try to conserve. And through this, we get to consider indirect effects of the use of things like plant protection products. So indirect effects such as reduction of food resources, habitat loss, so on and so forth. So that's our ideas. This is, in fact, taking environmental risk assessment forward a step to how it's been traditionally done in this area. So we're in the phase of improving, taking forward our risk assessments, making the best use of the latest science. Next slide, please. And then in more detail, what do we mean? Well, we have two documents out there from 2010 and the guidance from 2016 that describe how we think these specific protection goals should be identified and then defined. And okay, here's some of the considerations that we have in there. If you work in the area, I would say there's nothing particularly surprising that you're going to see here. But again, the importance is rather the detail that we need to make this operational. And that again comes down to work like we see in the report from INRAE. This is providing us with the bread and butter, the meat, the information that we need to make operational the concepts of specific protection goals, service providing units, and so forth. So the next slide, please. And described in the documents, there are a number of key steps necessary for the definition of our specific protection goals. And not surprisingly, we started with the identification of service providing units, where we're focusing on species vulnerability and the representativeness of those species for a functional group. And again, we're looking particularly into the scientific literature and scientific research to help us identify and validate the relevance of those species. We are looking, of course, to investigate interspecies sensitivity of the key driver species amongst our SPU. We want to characterize the exposure of the species identified as key drivers. And again, quite a bit of the reports that we've seen from INRAE is detailing current knowledge about levels of residues. Complicated, absolutely. It's not just presence or absence. We need to know values of concentrations, quantities. And just to make things more complicated, we also have to have some idea about the bioavailability of pesticides in the various compartments within the environment. So exposure is pretty complicated. If you add into that, of course, the time when this is occurring, the duration, the season, and so on and so forth. Just taking a few random measurements here and there is not very helpful for us. In general, one of the problems that we're facing is a lack of methodology and systematic data gathering, which is what we need, again, to provide us with the detail that would enable us to come to more significant conclusions. And that's something that we're very interested in seeing being driven forward. And again, research like that being carried out by INRAE, we think is very helpful for this. Establishing quantitative links between direct effects of pesticides and ecological consequences, so being able to tie cause and effect together, again, is something where we're looking forward very much to having more information. And again, we have reflections on that in the INRAE report, okay, exactly the direction that we want things to go in. And of course, just to calm people down, we have to have something that can be implemented in terms of risk assessment. So there's no point wishing for the sky, having a perfect data set for everything imaginable. It'll never happen in a risk assessment context. So we have to be able to have risk assessment methodologies that can operate with a minimum of data and yet can tell us something useful. So this feasibility part is very important, sometimes frustrating, I know, for our research colleagues, but at some point we have to be able to define what is the minimal basic set of data and information that we would need to work with. And the next slide, please. So through all of this...
I should just, excuse me, if I go to conclusion now, because about 10 minutes, so...
Sure. Okay. So just to say, our next steps are going to be a revision of some of our guidance documents, which will help us identify the specific protection goals. And then the next slide, please. And we have a very extensive research program, 15 million. We're investing over the next 5 years to support this area. And the next slide, please. In which we're hoping to, of course, to involve many organizations, particularly those that are present today in this meeting. We're very interested in having your collaboration there. Again, the work from INRAE, just to be very explicit about it, provides us with very important information that's supporting the development of our guidance documents that will lead us to be able to develop specific protection goals. Very important source of expertise and experts, and I would really emphasize the importance that there is in identifying the people, the experts to involve in the process of developing our science. So this very useful. And the identification of gaps in knowledge, data and methods, again, very useful, corresponds very well to the challenges that we see in those areas too. So that's another thing that we can follow up on, either through direct funding coming from EFSA, but also we influence other research programs, particularly those managed by the Commission, to ensure that they're producing science that's useful to take forward the risk assessment program. And I think I will leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Tobin. I'm sorry for pressing you a little bit, but I think it's also very important to have time to exchange with the audience, and we have several questions that have been addressed, and I will try to organize the discussion in at least two dimensions. So we thank you for all the panelists for your contribution, and we're now starting the discussion part of the webinar. And before, I would like to take this opportunity to say hello to our colleagues from the peer board of directors and peer coordinators who are online. I see some names on the system. So we are going to during the time of the discussion, we are putting on the screen a survey which is going to appear, I think now that Clara should put it on the screen, so that you as participants may express your views on the benefits you see from this type of activity. I mean the interaction between science, knowledge, and policy making. Either you are a scientist and you should answer question 1 and 2, or belonging to the group of policymakers or potential users of the outputs of such activity. And these are question 2 and 3. So you can start completing the survey now, and the results will be displayed at the end of the session. And we'll have some feedbacks from the panelists, and I will give you also some feedbacks from my personal point of view on this question. So perhaps to start the discussion, I've picked up some question in the system, and I will perhaps start with we have two types of question, definitely. The first one concerns the object we are talking about. I mean, this type of collective scientific assessment, more on the rules, the way we implement it at INRAE, and we can implement it at the level of a network like PEER or Alternet. And the second set of questions is more dedicated on the content or the assessment that was presented by Laure and Stefan. So perhaps I will start with the first set of questions regarding this type of assessment, starting with you, Guy. You've seen in the chat there are some questions. The first one is on the set of experts you are having on board. Two questions related to this is, what is the place of practitioners within this group of experts? Because you mentioned experts that are identified based on their publication, but we all know that some practitioners are very nice skills in some fields, but they are not scientists for some of them, then publish in scientific papers. So how do you gather their experience, and how you take into account their advice? And still talking about the group of persons that are involved, what is the place for a non-French scientist? Because it was mentioned by one of the attendants. Is this something, let's say, restricted to French scientists or not?
Okay, thank you very much, Thierry, for these two questions. So the first question, what a collective scientific assessment is really an analysis of the scientific knowledge of all the scientific papers dealing with a given subject. So it is more than 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 papers that are to be read and to be analyzed. So this is only possible to be done by scientists, So it is why the expert committee is only composed by scientists from universities, from research centers, and etc. But in some specific studies, for example, we have done an advanced study about the capacity of the soil to store carbon and for carbon sequestration. And we have done this with different types of models. And so to do this, we need to have a very good view of the experience in all the different countries in France. And to do this, we have a specific committee. The name is a technical committee, and it is only composed by practitioners, by agricultures, etc. To be able to capture, to be able to know the real agricultural practices in the field. Okay, Thierry?
Yes.
Yes. Alors, about the second question. So yes, generally we work with Francophone experts. So either for France or for Francophone countries like Belgium, Switzerland, or Canada, or from Africa. So it's because generally we work for French public bodies. But at the moment, we have a new project on plastics for agriculture and food. And you know, this place of plastics is really very important, and it's very posed at European or international level. So for this collective scientific assessment, we have a European panel of experts. We have about 30 experts from different European countries and also from United Kingdom. And so we conduct the work in English, and it's the first time that we have this kind of work with the European experts, and we would like to continue to work at this European scale in the future, Thierry.
Yeah, thank you. I can confirm that it's another way to practice it, but it's probably very interesting to share also the views of the experts, and it will expand the basis of the analysis. And it's a little bit more complicated, but probably more successful in the outcomes of the assessment. And the second series of questions regarding the, let's say, the technical aspects was posed by Shell from Science. It's regarding 2 points. Funding is always funding coming from outside, and from if outside from public authority. And the second question is more on the impact. You answered in the chat, but I think it's important that everybody heard your answer regarding how do we assess the impact, especially the duration of its impact.
Yes. So for each project, for each collective scientific assessment, we have a specific agreement between INRAE and the public bodies, the public authorities, the ministries, or the national agencies. And in this agreement, there is a dedicated budget to cover the cost of traveling, of organizing the different symposium, meeting, etc., to edit the report, and etc., and etc. It's about 200,000 euros, about. And but so there is a specific budget, specific funding, but there is no budget for the salary of the scientists that are in the expert committee, because all the scientists are civil servants. They only belong to public institutions, universities, of research centers. So there is no budget for the salary, Thierry. Okay?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And about the impact, yes. So we have conducted a specific impact analysis of different projects. For example, we have analyzed the impact of this collective scientific assessment about pesticides in 2005 with specific methods of INRAE. The French acronym is ASIRPA. You can find it on internet. And this is a method that allows to assess all the different impacts, the societal, economical, social, environmental, political impacts, etc. Okay, so what we have seen is that a very important project like this on pesticides has really a lot of impact, and also it's a long duration of impact. You know, we have an impact during more than 5 or 10 years. These reports are really very important for a long time, Thierry.
Mm.
Okay.
And perhaps just to add to your answer, that in some cases we can also imagine to have some, let's say, revision or upgrade of previous assessment. INSERM did it for the assessment of pesticide impact on human health. So we can have a revision in some instance if there is something that is needed for the public authority.
But Thierry, perhaps we can say that it's very difficult to assess this impact. Yes. It really needs a specific work, okay?
Yeah. But it's important for scientific institution to prove or to demonstrate their impact. Among the audience today, there are some colleagues from various scientific organizations across Europe, and I think for them it's also important to see that they're asked to prove or to demonstrate that have an impact. And this type of activity is perhaps specific, but it may perhaps have another dimension of impact as compared to, let's say, regular publication, for example. And perhaps the next question will be shared with Yannick and Tobin. It's on the question of the let's say the agendas, the perhaps sometimes differing agendas in terms of time between research, between knowledge on the one hand, and on the regulation, on the public policy on the other hand. How do you see this possible mismatch, or how can we improve the coordination between knowledge generation, synthesis, for example, through a collective assessment, and the incoming or newcoming public policy decisions? Perhaps Tobin, for the EU, because you mentioned some new improvement in the PPP regulation. And what is your vision about the time frame of research versus public policy?
Yes, thank you for the question. This is certainly something that exercises us a lot. The time frame, you have to anticipate big delays between somebody initiating a piece of research, for that research to be published already, to be publicly available, to be in many ways confirmed by complementary studies, for the information to then be gathered into something that's actionable for risk managers, so the risk assessment process. And then for that maybe to be converted into legislation, which is not a quick process. It also requires a bit of delicate timing with the European Parliament. We have to have a Parliament that's receptive maybe to some of the more controversial aspects, or certainly we know that the environment is not something environmental concerns are not shared by all flavors of the Parliament, shall we say. So you can be easily looking from 10 to 20 years between a scientist having an excellent idea and something being actionable in terms of legislative actions. This is a long time, and we understand that this causes frustration. But we also have to make sure that we have a very firm scientific foundation to whatever decisions are being made, which can affect, once we're getting into legislation, these can have very large social economic effects on the livelihood of farmers, on the health of consumers. So, these are serious decisions that need good, solid evidence to back them up.
Thank you, Tobin. And perhaps, Yannick, from the French ministry, you mentioned in one of your slides, let's say the dynamics with the eco-phyto and the different exercise. So what is your thought about the disconnection or misconnection between research and the time of research and the time of public policy?
Oh, the time of public policy, it's like for biodiversity, it's something stochastic that is also evolutive and that needs also to be interactive. And it's really something dynamic that is make of impulse and appropriation time that needs also to be really developed in a long term, that like Tobin just said, during years and years. But after really a long time, we can see that links are really engaged between scientists and end users for policy, and the connection between the time of science and the time of policy is becoming shorter and shorter. But it's also the capacity that we have to educate ourselves to science and to appropriate also the science, but also to help also scientists to be aware of what will be also usable by end users. It's really a dynamic process from both sides, where we have all of us a role to play.
Yeah, thank you. Definitely, we should educate each other to what we are expecting from the others. And perhaps, Guy, a question related to this. How do you see the anticipation? I mean, you have been talking to us about the fact that you're discussing with the the ministries, for example, when they want to commit a new study, it takes time. You mentioned 6, 8 months, perhaps more. How can we be more reactive or anticipative, not only for INRAE, of course, but for all the institutions present here? For example, if peer network or Alternet wants to be involved in a forthcoming activity, how can we be more, let's say, anticipative of the needs from public policymakers?
It's a difficult question, Thierry. But first, what can I say is that generally we are late. Okay, when we do a scientific assessment, but sometimes the politicians are more later than us. Okay, so sometimes it's okay. Okay, the agenda is good, but for your question, Thierry, yes, we try really to anticipate as much as possible the future topics, okay? Because to match the different agenda, the scientific and political agenda, we have really to anticipate as much as possible. To do this, sometimes with you, Thierry, we try to have discussions with several ministries, with several agencies at national level or European level. To try to identify the best moment to initiate a new project. But you know, at European level, we can know really the political agenda of the Commission or of the Parliament. So this is really known. So it's for example about pesticide. It was quite easy to know that there will be some different idea of regulations, etc. It's not the case at the national level. It's not. We have not a specific knowledge of this, but we try to do this, Thierry.
Okay, thank you, Gaël. Plus, last question for you before coming to the second part of the discussion on plant protection products, coming from Ursula Schmitz from UFSET. Will you cooperate with Eclipse on specific requests in the future, or did you already cooperate with Eclipse?
INRAE belongs to. Yes, now INRAE belongs to Eclipse. There is some INRAE scientists that participate to different Eclipse committees. So yes, we would like to perhaps in the future to have a greater interaction between what we do within the DOPE and what is done by Eclipse, Thierry. There is no problem in the future to try to do this together.
Okay, thank you. And I think that Juliette has heard your answer, and also Alan, and we discuss it together with the colleagues from Eclipse in the future. So if I coming now to the question of plant protection products, there was a lot of question asked by your colleague that I think has left now the webinar, but perhaps for Laure and Stéphane, how did you finally integrate the question of practices within your assessment? In terms of practices, I mean the way that farmers are using plant protection products. And did you integrate also the question of landscape, of scale, spatial scale and landscape in terms both of exposure, but also in terms of perhaps effect on biodiversity or let's say citizens living close to treated fields? I know that the human health was not within the perimeter, but if you can answer perhaps on these dimensions of scale and practices within the assessment.
No, go, Stéphane, if you want.
If you want, you can. Okay, I will take the lead. No problem. So regarding the practices, in fact, it was clearly outside from the scope of our assessment, because the main aim of our work was to evaluate the knowledge about the contamination and the resulting impacts on biodiversity, but not to evaluate the practices that could reduce the use of pesticides. So clearly, this was not in our scope, but we can mention that there are other works regarding these topics, especially at INRAE, with a priority research program regarding growing and protecting crops differently. I think it's a term in English of the priority research program, and also another collective scientific assessment about the protection of crops through the increase of plant diversity. So there are some other works regarding this kind of topics, but it was excluded from our work. But we clearly considered the landscape and the spatial dimension regarding the effect, both in terms of reduction of transfer with the implementation, for example, of buffer zones or something like that, but also to preserve some buffer zones for preserving biodiversity and to enhance the resilience and recovery capacities of ecosystems following exposure. So it was clearly included in our conclusions.
Oh, thank you, Stefan. And perhaps a more personal question, because it comes from Louis Brandel in the question that I have the same, quite the same. As scientists, as your participation in this expertise, an impact on the way you work on approach science, and if you have some, let's say, message to convey to scientists in the audience, what for you are the main strengths, and if there exist weaknesses of the contribution of a scientist towards such an exercise? You can
maybe
answer
I can
freely. It's between us.
Thank you. So for me, it's really a great experience. Of course, it's very time consuming. It is important to say that, but it's very constructive, and also it allows to develop new collaborations in new topics, and to exchange with new colleagues. And also for my own case, I am a physician at the beginning, so I learned many things in ecotoxicology, and for me it's very useful to develop new projects with new questions and new approaches. So really it's great experiences, and I recommend to everybody, if they have the opportunity, to coordinate or to participate to such a CSA. It's very constructive.
Thank you, Laure.
And perhaps to complete, besides the scientific importance of collaborating with various scientists in different fields, it's also a great opportunity to clearly evaluate the possible impact of our research and to interact with different stakeholders and also the ministries and different agencies. So it clearly allows us to understand that research can clearly help to improve our society and environmental quality and so on. So, because it was one of the main questions of the different experts to know if the report will be read, and if it would be an impact, because it's really time consuming, and it's not only to write some review papers, it's clearly to disseminate research results to the general public and to various stakeholders who can move towards action. It's important.
I think we can go back to this point at the end of the discussion, because a very important question in the chat, and I want to answer to all of you, of the way you can still promote science at the moment where science is highly debated. I think that we've seen it with the COVID, that everyone began an expert in epidemiology and so on. So how can we convince that science has still something to say? But let's think about this. I will ask you, each of you, an answer. Perhaps, Tobin, a question that was asked by Philippe Debrien on the question of is there any progress on the question of long-term connect toxicity evaluation methods? It's very technical, but you mentioned that some progress are made on the assessment and for regulation. So can you give us some, let's say, flavor on what is coming and what is new, or what are the progress in this field of assessment for PPPs?
Yeah, sure. So certainly one of the exciting areas is the move away from whole animal experimentation through to what we call new assessment methodologies. So this is taking advantage of in silico methodologies, so analyzing existing data in new ways, and the introduction of new in vitro methodologies. So test tube methodologies, organs on a chip, all these sorts of things, which will complement the information that we already have. The animal studies that we have are in animals, rats and mice principally. We know rats and mice better than we know humans. From a scientific point of view, absolutely. We understand them incredibly well. And so we can go do very in-depth interpretation of results coming from whole animal studies. But these are rats and mice, they're not humans. And by complementing these with some of these new assessment methodologies, we think that we can take the science into rather more precision, which I think will help a lot with addressing some of the concerns based about the representativeness of some of these animal models. It'll also enable us to produce results faster, which is definitely a good thing. Cheaper, well, potentially in the long term as well. And that means getting more results, which is going to be meaning we get better risk assessments coming out of this. So I think from the methodology point of view, it's looking very optimistic. I noticed in the question, there's also a sub-question on chemical mixtures, which is a big one. And there we're making progress in the area of human risk assessment. We have our first steps in terms of operating a methodology for looking at exposure to multiple chemical residues for humans. Humans is, again, relatively easy because it's one species. We would love to do the same for the environment, but now the environment is thousands of species. So the problem becomes many orders of magnitude more complicated, but yeah, we'll be going there once we gain a bit of experience with the humans. Next thing to address will absolutely be chemical mixtures in the environment.
Oh, thanks a lot, Tobin. And perhaps a question for Yannick regarding the not only the French situation, but we all know that there are some let's say tensions between the biodiversity dimension, let's say the ecology dimension, and the agricultural one. What do you want to preserve? We need to produce, but we also need to preserve biodiversity, human health. So can you share with us the vision of the ministry on this balance between the interest for humans and perhaps the cost for the environment, and how such an assessment, that the one what was performed and presented today, can help you in the balancing between human interest and, let's say, nature interest? It's a very harsh question, sorry, but
yes, in 1 minute it's really to finish also the exchange. It's really a tricky question because the time of politicians is not the time of nature, and for sure we have to find a good balance between also those needs, and that's why also France created the General Secretariat for Ecological Planification to really balance it and to find a way, maybe not the perfect one, but a sustainable one, to be engaged and to ensure that our country will be able to have a sustainable future, because the balance between the need of economical development, of individual well-being, and the capacity of nature to be there in the upcoming centuries is really something that is really hard. That's why we need not only a thematical or silo approach, we need really an integrated approach. That's why the One Health approach is fundamental for us if we want to balance all those elements into a more sustainable approach. And the role politicians, but our role also as administration is also to facilitate the understanding of those multi-factorial aspects into really something balanced. So I apologize if my answer is not perfect, but it's the best that I can provide you. I could provide you more example on other topics, but it's really one of the trickiest question, and the discussion that we have between IPCC or IBES or at international scale are reflecting exactly the same challenge. How can we have something sustainable? And today, the sustainability science is really something that will need also to be developed if we want to ensure something different from how it's engaged today since decades, that we step by step realize is not livable in a short or medium term.
Oh, thank you, Yannick. It was not an easy question. Thank you for this answer. And just to come to the end of this discussion, so coming back to the, let's say, the general question, how are you balancing the scientific focus of the exercise we presented today with the, I don't know if it's a reduced credibility, but the questioning of science in the political environment, but also in the society as a whole? How can you convince a citizen that you are saying something that is based on knowledge and that is actionable for policymakers? Perhaps coming to you, Tobin.
Yeah, well, maybe two quick ones on this one. First one is as scientists, and here I'm speaking absolutely to the whole of the scientific community, we have to be more proactive in reacting to the misinformation that is being spread through all kinds of different sources. This is absolutely in our interest, but most importantly in the interest of society, that we make sure that the truth is put out there. And I think that's a responsibility that we all have. And then also when speaking to wider audiences, we have to make sure that we speak in words that people understand, and people understand how this affects them on a very personal level as well, rather than dealing with very complicated scientific terms and hypotheses. This just doesn't communicate.
Thank you. Yannick?
I don't know what to say more. I think that Tobin really well summarized it, and yeah, I think yeah, this balance is challenge for the future. So I think that keywords have been already said, and I totally agree with Tobin.
So thank you. And coming now to Laure and Stefan, as scientists involved in this type of exercise. You mentioned, Stefan, that you have been giving a lot of interviews and papers and the radio and so on. So how do you manage this tension between fake news and knowledge, for example?
I think that it is really important for us to be able to say, I don't know, or I cannot give an answer to your question. Because during the various interviews, many questions were outside from the scope of the expertise. So clearly, it was necessary to say, no, I cannot answer to this question because I'm not an expert in this topic, and my thoughts are not credible in a scientific way. So I can give you my point of view, but this is not a scientific point of view. I think we have to be able to do that.
I agree with you. Lois has something to add on what Stefan said, or?
No, I fully agree with Stefan, and I also think that it's important, as it was said before, to communicate clearly. That's very important. And also, of course, the transparency. I think it's a very important thing in science.
Thank you. And Guy, for the final words on this question. Guy, are you here? Yes, he's here.
Sorry, Thierry. No, nothing to add. It's okay. No, Thierry.
Okay, so thank you for your this very interesting discussion. We are coming now close to the end of the webinar, so perhaps Clara, you could display the results of the poll. So if I, yes, a lot of scientists are eager to participate. It's interesting for them to have to contribute to public debate. This is that's a good news, because in some case we can have the reflex to be, let's say, protective and say, okay, I don't want to get, let's say, a question or challenged by people from outside. So it's something that is very important, I think. And for the policymakers, they are eager to benefit from an exhaustive multidisciplinary scientific state of the art, but you understood that it's quite an intensive task, but if it's anticipated, it's feasible. And there is about a third of the people answering that they want to obtain recommendation from public decision. Do you have some comment on this specific question, Guy? This answer?
No, I think it's very interesting to see that the scientists are as this objective to participate to the public debate, to the public policy. So I think this is really very interesting, very important.
Highly positive, yes. And just for the policymakers, of course, we will have some insight and enlightenment of the decision, but perhaps not always recommendation, which is very specific and which is not really the task or the, let's say, the objectives of all the scientists, but we should discuss it in another webinar. It's very important. The difference between information and recommendation is not exactly the same. So I will just perhaps give you some the personal feedback on this webinar. I think that the success of such collective assessment, I think, really relies on the interdisciplinary approach and the choice of experts to limit bias, of course. But we need to have, let's say, the larger basis for the expertise would be the better. And I think we have to think about the way we can organize between research organizations to propose something to policymakers. And I clearly think that within the peer network and Alternet, we have the opportunity to offer such a basis for expertise. And as Guy said, one of the strengths of this collective assessment is the length of validity of the conclusions, usually 7-10 years. It's very important. And also important to have the advisory committee you mentioned, Guy, and the stakeholder committee on board during the whole process is also, for me, a key element. We heard that science policy connections require time, but I'm not sure that we have so much time remaining before acting in a very decisive way. So we need to be really proactive together to identify and to go quickly towards, let's say, synthesis. And finally, as a personal testimony as a scientific director of INRAE, I may assess that such an assessment brings benefits for science because it also brings question, where are the gaps in knowledge? It provides ideas for the implementation of future research strategies for a given organization, but also for the whole community. So it's very, very important to continue to develop such an interface. And I hope that this, I wish that this webinar will be one opportunity to start again or to carry on this such initiative. And on behalf of the organizers, I want to thank you again for your contribution, of course, our panelists, our audience, and I give now the floor to Clara for the concluding message to this webinar, and wish you a nice afternoon. Please, Clara.
Yes, so as Thierry said, thank you a lot to everybody for your active participation. And we have just a last question for you. If you want to share with us a remark, a feedback about this webinar, about what you think about this, we are very pleased to hear it. So normally you should have a last question which appeared on your screen. And also, if you have suggestion for a potential next webinar, we are very interested about it. So I will let the webinar open for 10-15 minutes in order to leave you the opportunity to write us something if you want. But if you have anything to say, you can just leave now. So thank you again, and see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye.